Grown-up men materialize and perpetuate collective age-old stories produced by human brain malfunction. Surprisingly, I'm gonna say, welcome to the Flick Lab. I'm Karri. Who are you?
I don't know, it's a question to myself also.
Yeah.
Who am I? What's my name?
I don't know. Tommy? Väinö? Henrik. Yeah, this is the kind of film podcast where I guess a priest becomes a film podcaster, becomes a music video editor, right?
Perhaps becomes priest someday once more.
Full circle. We're from Finland, and we've studied a bit of media, whatever it might amount to. You decide. What do we do here? You decide. And yes, we have a beautiful accent because we are not Native Americans. No, Americans. And the podcast structure here goes more or less in the way that it's been going, that we pick a few movies and try to find some kind of a tying logic around all of those movies. Oh, well, I guess that covers it. Shall we get to it?
Yeah, by all means, why not, yes.
Yeah, well, why the hell are we watching this film, Henrik?
Well, I could ask you the exact same question.
Ooh.
Except I guess you're going to defend yourself by stating that this is my pick.
This is your pick.
This is my pick, yeah.
Please explain.
I'm to blame for today. And my answer is, well, why on earth we wouldn't be discussing about this film? I mean, this is an international film podcast, and here I am providing the content. And just to look at what content it is. We have today's movie is an anthology movie, 8 different segments from 8 different directors from all over the world.
I know that.
I provided like whole smorgasbord of internationality to today's episode.
That you might have done, but you still haven't really explained it. Or is this kind of a new metal song where the lyrics go more like, why should I explain myself to you?
So, to be honest, I chose today's movie simply because it has a running theme, which is folklore, and well, it's 8 different directors from 8 different countries. You can't actually get like more international episode on this podcast.
That's true, and
yeah,
the same was true for the Finnish penis monster.
Well, we are even more international today. The infamous Christmas episode was only 3 nations. Today is 8, and we are actually visiting some nations that we haven't yet been visiting movie-wise.
That is true.
And on top of that, we are also finally making return back to Poland, which is a country where you used to live for a fair number of years, which makes you a perfect, like, a professional critic of Poland and Polish folklore, which by all means must mean that when it comes to the Polish segment of today's movie, you can tell all of us what it was all about.
Yeah, it was all about why Henrik should not be a priest. But
the dude in question was not a priest, he was just a gourmet cook.
But I'm kind of thinking this is some kind of a stab on me again, because we're talking about myths, lore, and folk tales, especially those subjects that I really don't excel on and am not a big fan of. But I will try to give you my views tonight too.
To be honest, that was not my intention. I didn't knowingly start to play you on thin ice today. I merely was focusing on the fact that, well, it's an anthology movie from different parts of the world, so we easily cover the international part of our podcast, and the fact that, well, all of these segments are at least supposed to have a unifying theme, which is folklore.
Yeah, the movie kind of does the whole tying up the themes for us tonight. Henrik, where to start? You want to go just one by one, or?
Yeah, I guess today's case, it's perhaps the easiest going and most productive to just go these through one by one. Because as it turns out, as a combination, today's movie, The Field Guide to Evil, that the whole folklore aspect kinda doesn't completely hold together throughout the movie.
Right, well, let's get into that. Our first victim is from Austria, Monster Stories from Austria, which is not about Joseph Fritzl. Sorry to everyone in Austria, banned yet again from one country.
Except not sorry at all.
Well, Joseph Fritzl, it sounds like a cereal brand anyways. Oh, the director duo here is known for Goodnight Mommy, which I believe we both have seen.
Yeah, some time ago. I can't say I remember like that deeply the movie anymore.
Yeah.
It was, but it made a fuss when it came out. It was for a short amount of time. Goodnight Mommy was all over the place, and I've seen it just once, and I just kind of didn't get into it.
Yeah, maybe it didn't completely satisfy with the end resolution, but it was kind of a fun ride nonetheless to see. And since then, they've directed another horror film called Lodge, which I haven't seen. Any experience with that one?
I'm aware of the movie. I do know what is the end plot twist because I managed to go into some. I was reading some analysis about modern day horror movies which spoiled the end twist for me. And like based on what I've understood about the movie, I also haven't like gone out of my way to actually see it.
Okay, well, let's jump right into their segment. So the whole plot twist or the plot kind of summarization pretext to this whole thing is: once upon a time in Austria, when life and love were still a sin, myths tell about monsters brought to human bedsides at night time. Monsters born from guilt and fear, sent to deprive us of our life's breath. Yeah.
It kind of makes sense in the case of the first segment, The Sinful Woman of Holfall.
Yeah, so what I essentially get from this, there's someone who becomes consumed by evil, which lesbian sex obviously is. Not my conclusion, but
naturally.
Yeah, it's the film's conclusion. I don't think they're trying to be making any kind of a statement about that it would be evil. It's just that their film is saying that in the context of those times and all that. So,
well, Holfall touches upon. I do think that it's a pretty good opener.
Oh yeah.
For this anthology, not because it's like that scary as a short. All of these segments are supposed to be short horror films, so obviously the scare factor comes into play when talking about these shorts. And in my opinion, Holfall isn't that scary as a short film, but it works as a good opener because it touches upon a crucial element when we are talking about the old folklore. Perhaps also when talk about the modern day folklore, but especially your olden times folklore, your classical fairy tales and folk tales, your old Brothers Grimm type of stuff. And the problem with a lot of that material is the fact that since those stories, they stemmed from the sociocultural sphere of those times and those close, tightly knit communes, which often in Western territories were extremely Christian. Surprise, surprise, oftentimes that the folk tales themselves were not looking that kindly into, well, things that were not traditional Christian conservatism. Like, for example, in Hall Fall's case, the possibility of gay relationships, or the whole idea of sexually active women, both which are things that have been shamed in the past folk tales and fairy tales, etc., etc. So in that sense, I do think that Hall Fall makes, well, not any kind of a groundbreaking observation when it comes to folk tales and folklore in general, but makes an still like as an opener piece an important observation and a tiny condemnation of the more problematic elements of folklore.
You said that it's not scary, but I agree with you that it's a great opener when it comes to not scary or scary. To be honest, with the scare factor of horror movies, I've kind of given up on that a long time ago. I don't think, well, there are still some individual frames, shots that kind of give you the creeps. Well, like maybe in this one, I really enjoyed one of the shots where what looks like a female entity or the monster that is in the cabin behind the bed. That was nice work indeed. But yeah, I think it's a pretty solid storytelling, and that's kind of what I was looking for here when I jumped into it. The film is also marketed, at least on IMDb, as something of a telling of the tales of the basis of the genre of horror as we know it today. My knowledge doesn't really go far enough that I could say about that. I can tell that there's like folk tales, and old stories, and yeah, they all share those kind of elements that you see in many horror films today and horror stories. So, but I don't know if these particular stories are so woven to the universe of horror. Anyway, I think this could be seen as a kind of a revenge of the family members, the way that these kind of stories were built up on those days. You know, lesbian sex was forbidden, so therefore there could be some nasty person from your community who would organize some kind of a creep factor, some scare for you, so you will not do that again. So these silly stories, so to speak, kind of carry on. But simple story, and quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's simple is actually quite good adjective to describe Hall Fall. It is pretty enjoyable. Short. I agree with that. There was I blown away by it? No.
No.
And I do think that, and this is going to be a running problem with the Field Guide to Evil itself, which is the fact that I do think that at the end of the day there are too many short films in this anthology, which means that they don't have enough time to actually go anywhere properly. And Hall Fall, in my opinion, also kind of suffers from this. Like it touches upon the whole idea, or it raises the point that in folk tales, for example, lesbian sex can be is easily villainized and condemned, but it kind of doesn't go anywhere from like that observation. It also it has its own story, which is, to say it kindly, extremely simple. There is the open-ended ending of the film, which just kind of is dropped on you, and the possible ramifications of that ending, or what it insinuates is never really opened up and talked about. Like there is a possibility with the ending. There's a possibility that there may be an incestual sexual abuse angle.
Oh, really?
Into this story. Yeah. I'm pretty much basing this reading onto the fact that when we finally see the demon during the final night, and our main girl takes the knife to defend herself, the final form that the demon takes, and it's really quickly when this is shown, but it's the girl's mom. And the next morning, the mom is covered in small surface level cuts, and the knife that the girl was holding the previous night in order to defend herself from the demon is now covered in blood. So I kind of took it, especially because in the sexual angle every so often go beneath the undercurrent of the folk tales. I took it that it hints towards the possibility that the mom could have been sexually abusing her daughter. And the whole, oh my god, there's a sneaky nighttime demon attacking me thing could be just, the troubled psyche of the daughter kind of finally coming to terms with what her mom is doing to her, and just kind of like her subconscious trying to paint the situation into something else than what it is. She believes that she's targeted by, in this case, Alp, a Germanic elf, and in reality, she's just been attacked by her mom.
So you're saying that this is, after all, about Joseph Fritzl?
Yep. Or I'm saying that that's one possible reading of the situation. It would also kind of fit into the overall theme of the short, which is the sexual awakening of our main character, and also, well, if not lesbianism, just, a curious sideline travelings into girl-on-girl intercourse. Like it's not stated that the characters in the film are lesbians. They may just be, sexually active, curious women, and it might be that there is no Joseph Fritzl angle with the mom, but that it would kind of work. I see that it could fit into the themes of the short.
Could be, but what I definitely see is that there's kind of forceful passion between these two young ladies for whatever reason. They are very drawn to each other, and they do what they do, and the consequences are murky. And it seems that Kathy, the main girl of the film, is then consumed by evil after doing these acts, and then at the end of the film, spoilers, as we always do, her partner then smiles at her from the window. So what I see is that they are both kind of consumed by something that they shouldn't be consumed by. Interesting ending for a story, but if you want to take it from the folklore angle, fair enough.
Yeah, it's not super tied into any folk tale as far as I was able to track it. The folklore angle here is the creature, Alp, the Germanic elf entity, which often is being depicted as, well, as a mess, in fact. Because when it comes to Germanic elves, they're kind of all over the place. It's or at least, with my layman's understanding of Germanic folklore, or Alps, they are really easy to, or it's really hard to tell what is an Alp and what is, for example, Druid. And that becomes a question later on, in another segment of today's episode. So, because of this, it's hard to actually say what exactly is the creature that is stalking the main character, and what are supposed to be the attributes that go with that creature. But quite many of the Germanic elf folk do have this incubus type of nature. Some of them are like downright, or some of the folk tales have elf characters that are downright rapists. So the sexual angle does fit the folklore take here, and overall, like the depiction of how the entity in this segment works, it fits pretty nicely into the Germanic elven creature folk mythology.
Yeah.
There are, once again, the creature only appears or directly attacks at nighttime, which is and there is the sleep paralysis angle with the attacks, which ties into with the famous nightmare painting by Henry Fussell, in which, you know, the original title nightmare stemming from German Nachtmar, which roughly translated would mean elf dream. So kind of like, even though it's not like a folk tale being depicted here, that the folklore angle works pretty well in this instance through the character or through the entity that the film uses.
Yeah, overall, well, I'll summarize it so that the film doesn't blow me away either. It doesn't really have to do that, but quite enjoyed it and was surprised positively by, well, the overall of this film, this collection of 8 films. And it has a relatively low score on many sites, surprisingly, but it's a pretty worthwhile trip anyway. By the way, there's something about the goats in these stories, often that goats are related to something evil, or in here we have the sucking of the breasts of that animal, or if it's not goat, then it's some similar animal, because there's like 10 similar animals, but let's say it's a goat.
Yeah, goats all together are, well, they're actually showing up surprisingly a lot in mythology, in folk tales, also in religion, or at least some modern interpretations of religions. Like back in the olden Greeks, I do remember that goats were, well, like, Greeks considered goats sacred animals, since the animals were sacred to the Greek goddess Artemis, who was the goddess of hunt. And from there you have like repeated folk tales which do have goats, and eventually you kind of reach today's Christianity, where the opposing side of Christendom, Satanism, uses goats to uses goats constantly in their imagery.
Yeah.
Also, you know, in Finnish language, at least, we often tie goat with Satan, like word-wise. Vanha pukki.
And Austria seems to be a very good location for the build-up of this kind of legends or stories. Seems that it has a lot to do with the landscapes as well. I'm getting that feeling, like there are a lot of mountains in Austria, and these are good material for folklores. There's caves and cavern systems, there is elements behaving in unusual ways, the howling of the wind in certain parts of the mountains, how it howls, it might be under your feet, just making that kind of a very specific noise at night when it's pitch black and your imagination runs wild.
Yeah, it's a good place, if nothing else, as a backdrop for your, like, historical Christian conservatism movie.
Well, shall we travel to Turkey?
Well, better not. I've heard Turkey is a weird place. I also heard that Turkey creates pretty weird modern horror.
Yeah, well, here is Haunted by Al-Kharisi, the childbird of Jinn, directed by Can Evrenol, or however you would like to pronounce that. So, yeah, let's throw the baby out with the well water.
Well, Turkey is not perhaps that well known as a film country when it comes to it. They've had a film industry, certainly. They've made noticeably good movies, but usually when people tend to think about like film countries outside of Hollywood, you get your usual suspects. You get your France. You get your, especially the New Wave. You get your Germany. You get Italy. Usually Turkey is not on that list.
Yeah.
But recently Turkey has been trying to break through and trying to like open and broaden its take on the global cinematic market. It has been breaching into horror and fantasy territories, like precisely like Evrenol's previous film Baskin, which was a Turkish horror fantasy movie that got surprisingly a lot of press outside of Turkey also.
Yeah, this director seems to be a guy who's into much of the rare and bizarre corners of world cinema and had quite a lot of local influence from fellow directors and workers in the field. He has also helmed a Netflix original TV series in his home country called The Protector. Haven't checked that out, but he left that after first season due to creative differences. It certainly seems to be a guy to look into, and maybe a Turkish cinema should be something that we should look into. And I realized that I guess I'm now de facto talking about the animal turkey all the time, because it's not Turkey anymore, Henrik. It's Turkije. I don't know how to feel about that.
I'm willing to ditch Turkey once Turkey itself ditches Erdogan. So, that the offer is on the table. It's up to you guys.
Oh God, I can't access any country anymore. But yeah. Having previously checked out Baskin, I'm started to pick up with Evrenol that he is a director who is very interested in the visual style of his movies. He's also interested in going into, well, I can't say perhaps new extremes, but perhaps new Turkish extremes when it comes to the visuals of his movies. Like Baskin, for example, very much like, well, his segment here. It was not a film focused so much on the plot, much like in the Haunted by Al-Kharisi. The plot was quite thin. At times it was also told in a way where you weren't exactly certain what was going on plot-wise. The focus, well, like the most of the chips seemed to be in the visual style and the visual storytelling. Also the aspect that I do feel is the strongest here in Al-Kharisi. You think this is the strongest of the bunch?
I do think that if nothing else, it's not the strongest of the bunch necessarily, and it's not strongest of the bunch visually. But I would say this is the most frightful of these stories.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is the most frightening, and I would say also very strong on the whole cinematography side of things, on the visual side of things, like you said. So this is related to the creature known as Al, let's say. In many languages, it's similar to that, Al, in Turkey and nearby countries. In Armenia, there is these Als who steal the lung, liver and heart, and it's kind of the same story in many of these countries near Turkey. And they can steal babies and cause miscarriage. There are slight variations to this, but in most of the countries it stays relatively the same. And you can ward off this creature with charms, iron objects, onions, garlic, typical.
Yeah, and with that in mind, it's surprising how far removed from that all the film's all actually is, because the creature here in this segment, it's nothing like any kind of nighttime organ stealer who attacks sleeping women. All of that is directly out of the window. This is more some type of a open trickster, trapper kind of demon.
Well, the Turkish variation is a little bit different, I guess, to some of the other variations. This is Al, as in Al Karisi, and it seems to be very hard to find information on this. But there was one website that was quoting an encyclopedia of spirits, the ultimate guide to the magic fairies, genies, demons, ghosts, and gods and goddesses by Judica Illes, where it's described as a creature that is deadly and vampiric spirit who craves the inner organs of horses and humans. And then it goes on into a long explanation, but basically babies are on the table as well.
Yeah, and in this segment's creatures case, craving for inner organs of women and babies means that you get stuck on a well.
Well, I guess the organs was optional.
I'm guessing the well is meant to be the Alcarisi's lair. There are bones to be shown, which I take are hinting in the fact that it's a place where she stashes her victims and then eats them later on.
Well, something like that. Well, what it looks like is that she, the mother, is now consumed by the evil as she's sown by the well, and seems to be gonna throw in the baby into the well, something, and there seems to be a connection between the what I will again call goat, and actually the goat is that one of those manifestations of that spirit, at least in one of these countries, and the goat seems to be kind of tied with the old woman who seems to be paralyzed or whatever is going on with the health condition of hers. And there's these pictures of sharing the eyes of goat. So, yeah, goat seems to be the one to kill, but apparently the goat has already transferred his spirit into this old woman. Okay, you try this one.
I took it more in the way, like, something to note with all spirits. I don't know about Alcarisi, but every other Al spirit is the fact that they usually are depicted to be doppelgangers or shapeshifters. So I took it that the goat itself is nothing more than a red herring. The old lady has been the demon perhaps from, ever since the segment starts. It's just like it has been using its shapeshifting ability to masquerade itself as the old granny.
Yeah. But overall, visually, I got almost like some kind of a Sam Raimi vibe. Did you feel anything like that?
Towards the end, yeah.
Yeah.
There is some of that, well, can't say body horror, but and not really gruesome, but like there are body movements, especially, for example, in the scene where the girl is feeding the old lady. There's some type of a milky substance, and she's feeding it with a spoon. And it's not a direct, like, it's not a actual close-up on the old lady's mouth, but the mouth and the mouth's movements are really, like they are the centerpiece of the image in that scene. And while it's not gruesome, there is a certain level of uncomfortability that comes off from the way how she moves her lips, moves her lower jaw, and
yeah, there's a certain amount of that quirkiness, that kind of special humor that Sam Raimi spices on his movies that I find.
Yeah,
and
there's some of that, like, take a look at this and feel uncomfortable. There's also some of the more inventive camera angles towards the end, like when the mayhem really starts. Like, for example, when the girl is locked in the bathroom, and through the bathroom door glass, she sees the entity taking her child.
Loved it.
She's the shadow. There's the close-up of the blood, and later on, when she's on the well, there is like the shot upwards from the bottom of the well, looking at the old lady as she closes the lid. All of that, I did feel like, or I did get some Sam Raimi vibes from those.
Yeah, or maybe what we're looking for is there's a certain cartoony element about it. For me, anyways.
I don't like. I'm not saying it's not there. Where cartoon is perhaps not what I personally experienced. But this is once again, this is tying with I guess me seeing Baskin before seeing the Field Guide to Evil, because Baskin kind of does this exact same thing, and Baskin does uses the visual language of the film to kind of go into the Hellraiser-esque body horror surrealism territory. And I kind of saw Haunted by Al-Kharisi as a certain type of a visual continuation from the directions that Baskin took. Not going more extreme, in fact it's more subtle and more like hold back here. Baskin aims to go all the way towards the end, and Haunted by Al-Kharisi stays very grounded even in its ending. But I kind of saw a communication when it came to the visuality of the movie. I kind of saw a discourse between Al-Kharisi and Baskin.
Okay, well, good advertisement. I have to check out Baskin at some point.
It's okay. I'm not. I don't think it's the unsung masterpiece that it at time was marketed out to be. The story is, in my opinion, pretty thin. Also, kind of really hard to follow. And it's overall, to me, Baskin felt like a movie that emphasized more of its visuals than the actual story and storytelling.
Alright, is it time for some Polska?
Well, by all means. Tell us what Kindler and the Virgin was all about.
Well, obviously, Kindler is the lady and the Virgin is the priest. Directed by Agnieszka Smoczynska. Yeah, this might be like the most Polish-looking priest ever on screen. Ever. Anyways, the story summarization is, quote, an allegory of magic and the desire to gain complete wisdom, but a mind that knows all can be a very dangerous thing, end quote.
Set in modern-day Poland.
Well, we can see the Polish coat of arms there. But I have no idea what this is based on. I guess that's modern-day Poland then.
I tried to look this one up, and I couldn't find anything. And my take is that this is not actually based on any folk tale, right. And not in folklore either. Especially, it's I took it that it's more like the core here. Instead of folklore, the core is about, just the universal question of, like, it's a more universal, more common story of beware the forbidden knowledge. Like the main question here is that how willing, or what price would you be willing to pay for the ultimate knowledge? In that sense, it's kind of the same question that also the French film Martyrs asked. How far would you go in order to achieve absolute knowledge? And I kind of, like, the feeling I have is that it's like a modern day tale. It's a modern day story that simply uses the old time setup. This is being set up to something, I don't know exactly what time period. Perhaps extremely late 1800s.
Well, it's a Polish film, so obviously it's based on Second World War.
actually could be. During the Second World War, and it just kind of uses that as a visual dressing in order to have this story be fitted into this folk story. Folktale anthology.
But yeah, what we have is some kind of flotation device powered proud young gothic lady in her morning dress telling secrets of men who will win all wars once you consume 3 hearts of the freshly deceased. Yeah, I've always been waiting for that moment when the moment when I get such wisdom from freshly deceased people. Yeah, makes sense.
Well, it's not completely far-fetched. Or the actual act is yes. But the logic that this story kind of plays with is not. Like there is something to the cultural cannibalism that exists in some tribes, and usually the idea behind the act has been twofold. Obviously, yeah, the food is scarce, so it's kind of like the deceased giving the one final thing to its community and making sure that the community itself survives, eat my flesh. But the second aspect that at least occasionally goes here is the idea that you somehow get some of the attributes of the person you eat. You gain his strength or something alike. And basically this is going on with the same tangent here. The thing just is that, instead of bodily strength, instead of health, what you are gaining is wisdom. But the act is more or less still the same. You consume human flesh in order to gain something.
Well, looks like the guy has already become a novelist in his cell. So I guess he gained a whole bunch of wisdom. What it actually looks like is that what he's doing there, he's writing the story of the war because he's grinning. So that's what it looks like to me.
I took it, on the other hand, I took it that he's conducting his next master stroke idea. The whole thing here, the story, the Kindler and the Virgin, is that, like you stated, the weird levitating demon lady promises the dude that if you eat the 3 hearts, you get all of the knowledge. You become all wise.
She is weird.
And the dude does exactly that. And if the weird lady is true to her word, that would mean that, the dude just gained all the knowledge, which he then uses in order to, bargain himself into a better societal situation, because my reading was about the end that he on purpose gets caught for the crimes so that he would be tried, and he does this simply for the sake that during his trial he can finally say to those who are in power, hey, I have this magical trinket that will help our king to win all wars. And when he's in prison, you start to hear the drum sound. Somebody is drumming in the battlefield. So I took it that at the end of the day, the king actually he gets imprisoned now, but the king is kind of making an agreement. I'm actually gonna try the drum thing. Let's see if it helps me win the war. And if the dude is correct, well, in that case, he is now in prime position to sell the king the next trinket. Give me 5 orphans, and I promise to you that from the pulled out teeth, I make you a toothbrush, which cures impotism or something like that. But anyways, he's in prime place. He's safe. He has pen and paper. He can start to devise the next trinket, which after now that the king finally wins the war and comes back to him, holy shit, my dude, the whole drum thing actually works. Well, then he can say, I actually have here the next trinket already planned out. If you just give me freedom and perhaps 5,000 gold, I can help you, get the next thing.
Yeah, or he's just writing a love letter to the weird lady, the corpse. Who knows?
Who knows? But I saw this as a type of a critique of the whole notion of rulers in the past and in present being consulted by sorcerers and seers. Like we have, when it comes to rulers, when it comes to monarchs, when it comes to presidents, we have a long tradition. There's some type of a seer-like figure. Sometimes it's a damn wizard, like Rasputin. Sometimes the series is completely mythical, like Merlin was to King Arthur. And these days, it's not longer, we are not dealing with wizards, but we are dealing with highly intellectual consults, like, for example, Bannon was to Trump. But basically, the framework is different. It's no longer magical. Now it's some type of I have the meme understanding of the internet, but the function is still the same. You have a ruler who puts his faith in some type of a chosen consultant or a seer. And I took that this is like a critique of that behavior. The tendency that rulers have to handpick a chosen individual who has like this backdoor access to them, because they are supposed to provide the secret knowledge how you lead well.
There's also some kind of rites and rituals. He slashes his wrists and seems to eat mucus as a preparation, something that the weird lady seems to have left on his arm when he levitates away. Whatever that might have been, but I will just say it's her mucus. Something communicates to me this is a very, very Polish film. Can't try to put my finger on why, but might be the priest. Might be just the priest.
Might also be using apparently extremely old building as your backdrop.
Oh, that building, I wanted to say something about that. Can somebody tell me what that building is? And if it's in Poland, tell me where. I'll be there.
I'm already treading for the nearest cemetery of that building.
Well, would it be USA, USA, USA?
Oh God! So apparently a Yank found a video camera.
Yes, and he filmed melon heads in. Yeah, Let's look at some A-level parenting from America.
Well, the parenting is not that bad in melon heads. It's
well, it leads into melon-headedness. But okay, let's get into that. Anyway, it's directed by American horror film and short film director, writer, actor Calvin Reeder. You might know him from VHS as Gary. And yeah, he has directed some short films that have been doing pretty good in the short film circles. But yeah, go ahead.
So, I guess we can just get this one out right away. I think that Beware the Melonhead is hands down the worst segment of the anthology. Ooh. It fails pretty much on every single level. Oh. And I can't understand what the fuck it's doing here.
Yeah, the story goes, the whole summarization, so that, quote, there are humanoid children found in the northern woodlands of the United States. They are said to possess an abnormally large cranium and are known to be aggressive, violent, and possibly cannibalistic, end quote. On what point here, Henrik, did the film fail? I think it crosses all the marks on that description. But yeah.
It's... We are talking about anthology films, or film anthology here, which means that, okay, of course the movies are gonna come all over the place. We are going to have directors with varying degrees of talent and varying degrees of budget. But somehow the USA managed to be the one that absolutely looks the cheapest. Every other film, like, if nothing else, it feels well like a short film segment that you could put in an anthology film and feel proud of it. Except Beware the Melonheads, which is like absolute B grade. Starting filmmakers trying to earn their first mark in filmmaking. That's like when it comes to visuals, when it comes to the cinematography, when it comes to the acting, everything reeks like that. This is the most run-of-the-mill experience that you have in this anthology.
Yeah, well, yeah, I understand where that could be coming from. This whole film is produced by, at least mainly produced by Legion M production company, and this is a company that says that it's the world's first fan-owned entertainment company, meaning that it allows fans to invest in the movies that they are producing or the TV shows, whatever they are doing, so kind of giving them an integral hand in the whole process. And the directors seem to be in these productions kind of something on the fan level, starting their career here, etc. So it gives voice to different doers.
Yeah, it does. But every other director here manages to hide the fact. And some of these directors, by God, are actually, they have less short films under their belt than, what our man Colin Reed here has. He's one of the more experienced directors.
Yeah.
In this anthology. So especially contrasted against that, the kind of the lack of quality here is somewhat astounding.
It seems a little hurried, a little rushed. I mean, even starting from the effects and the acting.
Yup. And when it comes to the story, it seems that it wasn't thought out that not much thought was put into it. And once again, it's a surprising complaint to be made, because this collection does have stories like goddamn Hallfall has. When you look at the story, like plot beat wise or plot element wise, Hallfall has less plot elements than Melonheads. That there's more things going on in Melonheads, but Melonheads still feels like the film or the segment where less thought about for the plot was given than in Hallfall.
This could be a little hard to explain, but I feel that it could be very cultural also, not just the director, but the culture in which they make films. Perhaps in America there is often this kind of mindset that, yeah, let's do it quick. There's a certain go ahead faster than maybe some other directors, maybe some industry pressure, I don't know, or you get used to the way of making films that there's maybe it's a low budget and you just have to go through the segments of making of the film as fast as possible, and then the quality might suffer, but then that might be kind of the certain quality or style of that country, if that makes any sense.
It kinda, yeah, I can understand the argument, but I'm still not letting the film off the hook simply because of that.
Yeah.
This was a disappointing experience in all merits, and that also includes the film's main, threat, bad guys, the titular Melonheads. Which is also a decision that I can't understand. Like, seriously, why the fuck Melonheads? Why did you choose Melonheads?
Did you find anything about the Melonheads?
The Melonheads are not that widely known urban myth. It's kind of a mixture of, or it's kind of a spin, in my opinion. And listeners can correct me in the comment section afterwards, but I took it as a spin of the Jersey Devil urban myth. You
wow.
basically basically have the same goddamn blueprint here. You have feral kids at times attacks, unsuspecting civilians who just happen to go through their turf or walk anywhere near their turf. You also have, not directly stated, but you have the hints of inbreeding in some versions of the Melonhead myth. Inbreeding actually is downright being brought up. It's not that typical aspect of the Jersey Devil myth, but the feral family, They ain't really going to find mates outside of the most obvious gene pool. And you also both share the whole cannibalism angle.
Well, in a way, Melonheads is an interesting choice for sure. If you think about the folk tales or stories from the United States, there's a lot of material to pick up from. I would firstly go probably to Sasquatch, do something about Sasquatch or the Bigfoot.
Yeah, or just use a creepy scarecrow.
Right.
You have an abundance of those.
Right.
Like Melonheads as a concept itself, and as this segment shows, it's not actually scary. When you actually see them, it's somewhat hilarious. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's also you can say, and this is something that of course plays a lot into urban legends, folklore in general, but like so many other tales, Melonhead story also perhaps somewhat insulting, because you obviously see where the whole Melonhead aspect stems from. It's basically, the fear of bodily malformation, the bulbous heads that we have here. Most likely is just based on the victimization of those suffering from hydrocephalus, which is a medical condition, the swelling of the head. So, nice fucking job, once again, picking your bad guy. The myth itself, in fact, and taking note that, like we so often with urban legends, you have different variations. You have like state-based variations. Ohio has a bit different spin on the Melonhead myth, than, for example, Connecticut. In my opinion, the Melonheads here in this segment, they seem to be based strongest in the Ohio and the Connecticut variants of the legend. From Ohio variant you have a creepy-ass doctor, and from Connecticut you get the location. But overall, it's kind of a mashed potatoes situation here, and like I said, there are variations depending on what area we are talking about. But some of the stories with the Melonheads is that they were supposed to be they were children locked in mental asylum. They escape one night and take on to the nearest woods, where they go feral. In some tellings of the story, the mental asylum staff abuses them mentally, physically. I most likely also sexually in some retelling of the story, so you have that aspect. In some cases, it's like the insanitarium, like prison insanitarium, and the Melonheads are inmates there, and and human tests are being run on them by mentally deranged doctor. Is it Dr. Crow, who usually gets to be the bad guy in this version? Eventually, the Melonheads, who now have been disfigured by Crow's experiments, they finally attack back. They riot. They slaughter the sanitarium staff, and then they run to the woods, where they now, get into the inbreeding and the feral stuff.
Right.
So you also like not just the demonization of the victims of hydrocephalus. You also have like the demonization of mental health patients, and the psychiatric practice, or through the dastardly Dr. Crow. You also have, depending on the story, the prison inmate population, once again, extremely violent and prone to cannibalism the moment you turn your back on them. There's a lot like who gets the blame when it comes to the Melonhead myth. Which is also one reason, and of course, as mentioned already, and like we already kind of talked about quickly in when we discussed about the whole fall. This is something that happens in urban legends. This is something that happens in folklore. Yes, I'm not like saying that Melonheads does anything especially increases here. But once again, I word out the question. Why did you choose Melonheads? Why didn't you take another urban myth?
I guess that's a big problem, kind of like you hint in folk tales in general, that they are truth-based on some level, and especially if there's something like that you mentioned behind possible Melonheads myth, then you're dealing with real-life roots, which is communicating to you that perhaps this is the filmmaker's lack of research, which might backfire on them, which might have already backfired. So we come into these very sensitive topics. But what I guess is both of our problem with the film, rather the film's problem, is that in contrast to the other films, it's not artistic. It's not artistic enough.
No.
Yeah. The appearance of the film is kind of run-of-the-mill US, how to say...
It's like a cheap American TV movie.
Right.
One of those that gets made like 5,000 a year.
Right.
And they are just pushed on streaming and pushed on TV channels, and you never actually watch any of them. It's just like content that is just being created in the sake of making content. Because somebody gets a funding if you make a film, so now we made a film.
But speaking of artistic and firing the cameraman, we have something from Greece.
Yeah, which comes from the Greece's input, whatever happened to Banagas the Pagan.
Directed by Yanis Veslemes. And the answer to the title's question is no. Nothing happened.
Well, he goes into, I guess, hell at the end. And just decides to stay there. Why not? You know, the lodgings are cheap.
The preface is, quote, Kallikansaros are the lowliest of the devil's children. They brood underground all year until Christmas Day, when they visit empty houses and play tricks on people. In parts of Greece where pagan customs are still alive, the Kallikansaros dare to mingle among the drunk, beast-like humans. Who is the beast of the film?
Yeah, extremely. Like we're kind of once again dealing with the trope storytelling aspect of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Today we are landing on the humans are the true monsters.
And
you may never have actually heard this revolutionary take in anywhere.
Yeah. There's something about how the camera carries itself from shot to shot about this this makes it the film kind of very hard to follow, in the sense where we are and where the kind of the storytelling aspect of the camera is just shit here.
On the other hand, I actually quite I do agree that the storytelling aspect of the camera work perhaps leaves something to desire, but I did enjoy greatly on the visual side of the camera work. I liked the energy, and I liked the sometimes even nauseating way how the camera operated. How it went into extremely close, extremely dirty close-ups.
I can see what they could be doing there. It's just I see that it's a problem of variation and problem of having perhaps the right angles to film from to know where everything is. For at least I got this nauseating feeling from just that.
Yeah, then again, I kind of believe that the film is doing this on purpose, because altogether it's a film, or it's a segment that does not want to let you know when it actually is happening. There are a lot of things that kind of makes it hard to say when. When does these events happen? You have the pagans who are dressing in fur and horns, but they also have a ghetto blaster. They have cars, but they are old cars. So, is it 2000s? Is it 90s? Is it the 80s? When exactly is this happening? And like there's a lot of elements. They very much like the characters, that the people in this film are like from somewhere from bloody 1800s, if not even the Viking times. But then they have a ghetto blaster, and then they have a car, and then they have. I couldn't exactly pinpoint from what period the military uniform is that we see once in the film. That could have perhaps given us a time frame, what period the film is, the segment is supposed to take place, but I couldn't exactly pinpoint it. But you have like modern-esque military attire, so it's like the time period here, it can pretty much be anything, and even like that the film opens, it closes with the segments. Like it's the story is told in the way that someone is reminiscing, is remembering what happened once. Well, we start in like quote unquote present, and the story goes back in time into time period X, and we don't even know what the present is, because the present actually looks surprisingly a lot like present. Like the opening moment of the film could even be like Greece in 2018.
Yeah, and seems that these are kind of creatures that crawl up from the underground world during Christmas, or during 12 days of Christmas, from 25th of December to 6th of January, the winter solstice period, for a fortnight period, and then during this time they are supposed to have other tasks than to be bothering humans, but then they're supposed to do that, but actually it's the humans that are bothering them.
Yeah, it kind of depends on, I guess, once again the version of the legend, because Karri Ojala as an entity is pretty much supposed to cause headache for the humans on the surface level. The idea kinda is that for the 12 days they cause havoc, they are mischievous, they cause harm, and then after that 12 days they have to return back to underground, back to hell. And once they are there, they actually notice that humans are on the surface are once again able to fix the havoc that they have caused. The humans they repair what is broken, and like they just fix the situation. And Karri Ojala looking at it, come into the realization that god darn it, we didn't like cause permanent damage this time, let's try again next year, and then it's a cycle that repeats. Yeah. Every year for 12 days they try, they never succeed, so they are like, yeah, back to the drawing board.
Yeah, Karri Ojala, I don't know where this is coming from, but it seems like almost like a sick orgy first, but seems that the humans are drinking wine from Karri Ojala's veins, kind of a biblical elements thrown into weird places.
Yeah, well, the segment brings up the whole priest character. So I guess I also didn't find a direct mentioning of Karri Ojala's blood drinking rituals, or the blood having any kind of like. In here it's hinted that it has some type of a psychological, some type of a drunkenness effect. They quickly comment that the drinking of the blood is supposed to lead into some type of a temporal insanity. And I didn't find like a direct mention of that actually belonging into the myth. So it might be that aspect here is brought up because they bring the priest who comes to see the now trapped Karri Ojala. So I took it that that's just a jab at Christianity, and it's poking the whole Holy Communion right in Christian worship, and that's why we have it.
Well, interesting elements, but it seemed like a bit of a mess to follow it. But I think it's on the lower end of the spectrum here.
On the other hand, I actually put it on the higher end of the spectrum, and I would say that when it comes to the filming style, or when it comes to the not visual, like cinematography, but when it comes to the way how the film is constructed, kind of a like energy vibe or vibe wise, I would say that there's a heavy paying tribute to the Soviet era filmmaking. This felt very much like Soviet film.
No.
Like if someone would have said that here's a Soviet made horror film, a short film, and it would have had like a Russian dubbing, I would have actually been tempted to actually believe the argument. So I can kind of I would perhaps suspect that some of the feeling that it's nauseating, that it's somehow that the short itself kind of puts you off. It may actually be like that Soviet era style filmmaking that we have here.
Yeah, it's just somehow the overall it feels kind of very, very mixed and chaotic. Maybe that's what it wants to do. Even the whole pacing.
Yeah, I would say that the pacing is extremely slow, perhaps even boring. Especially if you come unprepared. And the fact that, we have an American short preceding this one makes no favors here, because Christ, American was really in the hurry. So it's like you go 80 miles per hour and all of a sudden you hit all the brakes once the Grease segment starts. But I would say that this was from the segments of this anthology, I would say this is perhaps the most meanest and the most nihilistic of the shorts.
Yeah, it doesn't do any favors for the films, perhaps, because, yeah, like you said, that there's a lot of them. I don't, however, have a particular problem with the length of them. Maybe there's just a lot of starts and stops, which is always a problem in these kind of productions. But maybe it could have worked better if I would have just watched each film very separately. On some parts I did. Sometimes I took a break, like, okay, I need to gather my thoughts for a moment and continue.
I feel that the stories could have actually... They could have been stronger.
Right.
And they could have said more if they would have had more running time than what they ended up with.
And I actually thought that you were trolling me when you said that you would want to do this film now. I was just looking at the ranking, at the reviews, and what is this? So random. But yeah, actually, I'm happy that we're looking at it.
Yeah, and I like talking about the fact that I do think that the stories could have been longer. I think that also, whatever happened to Banagas the Bacon is a case example of this, because it does touch upon interesting themes. There is the paganism versus modernity, or new paganism versus old traditions angle that this film has. From all of these segments, this is the one that actually does still have its pagan roots. So that could have been an interesting direction to see exactly how far this can go in its like mind games about paganism in modern day, or the communal extremism that ends up happening here when the pagans, they form kind of a subcommune that holds the Kallin Kansaros as a prisoner and abuse him, and it starts to at the end it starts to kind of a spread. First, it's just the small group of pagans. All of a sudden, you have the priest, you have the military guy there. So the whole community starts to get into abusing the Kalikancharos, and the abuse itself also starts to become more and more extreme. It starts with shouting at his face, and it ends up with literal blood drinking. So perhaps also like that, how in such of a short time, in 12 days, a community can get so extreme, and how the abuse can get so out of hand. That also could have been like a theme that would have been like interesting to see more of, but then the short runs out of its running time, and it's just like, next story.
Yeah, well, I guess it's how you look at it, and maybe many of these films seem like they are just ending into a brick wall, but not necessarily. It's a kind of the thing with the short films. There's a lot packed into it. If you lose some of it on the way, then there's no ending for you. And some shorts really suffer from people who who are not able to digest enough of it to kind of, I guess, in a lack of a better saying, to get it. I'm not saying it's the case for you now, or for me now, but in general.
And talking about, your narrative ending, stopping at the brick wall, then the next segment.
Oh yeah,
This one stemming from India, the Palace of Horrors.
Yeah, Ashim Ahluwalia is responsible for this. So let's find out what all can go wrong on this guided tour to Indian jungles, while there's your colleague who secretly wishes for you to die. And we get a happy ending, actually, Henrik. It's a full circle.
Well, we kind of get partly and partly not. It's kind of how you approach it.
Well, it's a happy ending for the colleague, insofar as he's still happy that the colleague seems to be quite, well, if not dead, then very much injured. This is a very, very interesting mixed mash where we're talking about Henry Gentry, who was the owner-co-founder of Gentry Brothers Circus. As far as I could delve into the guy, well, hasn't gone into magical palace in the Indian forests or Indian jungles and experienced his eyes being pulled off. As far as I know, he very much kept his vision and died in the 1940. So this seems to be some kind of weird urban legend, even though there's nothing. If there were anything related to those eyeballs, then I think safe to say eyeballs were fine.
I actually to touch upon that subject matter, I'm not certain, and I'm somewhat suspicious that this actually is not based on any urban legend or any folk tale.
I'm sure that it's based on some belief, but I'm pretty sure that this didn't happen, but maybe some variation of it that makes sense. He might have traveled, I don't know why he would personally travel, but maybe he would travel to India to find tigers or some wild animals, try to pay a good price for them, and then because of his, narcissism, he tries to override all kinds of good manners in that location and challenge the local quote-unquote gods. Go on to some place where he shouldn't, and maybe he experienced something that he shouldn't.
Okay, because I on the other hand, I actually tried to look up the origins tale of the Palace of Horrors. Couldn't find chills, so I started to get the feeling that this is very much a story that has just been invented for, this anthology.
Could be, or could very well be.
Like this is, it's not actually based, it wouldn't be based on anything. It wouldn't be any take on anything already existing material. It would just, be the director, doodling something on a sketchbook, and then, forming that into a script.
Well, what it could easily be is that it is some kind of a Bengali folk legend that we just are unable to find. But instead of having the original characters, they just put Henry Gentry out of nowhere into it for reason X. Because the description of the film is based on Bengali folk legend over the summer of 1919, deep within the Asian Sundarban jungles, and veiled from the outside world lies a crumbling palace, home to strange rites and barely human curiosities. Barely human curiosities collected by a deranged king.
Yeah, that's what the opening text does say. But I'm kinda suspecting bullshit here.
Yeah.
Like, by all means, our listeners can really prove me wrong, and if I am, please do. I would actually love to hear what tale this is based upon. But even the fact that the filmmakers themselves refuse to actually give you any hints about what tale this is. Like Kaliganjaros and every other tale, they name the thing they are basing their tale on. This is that myth. This is the melon heads. This is Kaliganjaros. In here it's just, open-ended. Old tale from 1990. And nothing else.
And when you're marketing this film as something that is that this is kind of a root story of horror tales or the horror genre, if that is the case, then what is the story that we've never heard about? And if that is the case, why do you make this based on Bengali folk legend? Why not just tell the legend in the best way that you could tell it? I mean, in the as sourced way as you could tell it. Whereas now we have this. There's a couple of stories that are kind of sucking in that they are not able to tell exactly what they're based on.
And it does become somewhat of a problem in an anthology like this. Like with an anthology that outright markets itself as something that is now based on folktale. It's kind of like if you would make a anthology based on fairy tales, and you would have your typical fairy tales. You would have your Snow Whites and your Cinderellas, but then you would also have a couple of segments that are not actually based on any fairy tale. It's just some shit that the director of the segment in question just came up.
Yeah. Where this starts to sound like marketing nonsense, like creating the intrigue by which you write, origin stories to horror genre. Of course I'm gonna check it out. But yeah, as far as we know, Henry Gentry was the owner and co-founder of Gentry Brothers Circus, and remained in the business, then sold his business and created another business, suffered during the Great Depression, which the business did not survive in. Nothing particularly dirty that I could find on him, except that he is a guy who owns an animal wrangling company.
Yeah, and then again, when it comes to Henry Gentry, I'm not exactly certain that the real target here is even Henry Gentry. It's this gets kind of complicated because I'm not entirely certain what India is actually trying to do here. But to take the longer road here, Rudyard Kipling, dude who also wrote Jungle Book, which most likely you have heard of. At times he also wrote like horror stories, and I do remember one horror story from him. It was Mark of the Beast, which is quite quick, quite simple quick tale based on, if I remember correctly, precisely in India. However, the whole idea there is that you have a rowdy but cultivated Westerner who is hanging around with his two friends. And after drunkenly insulting Indian religions, he's attacked by a faceless leper. And the leper nuzzles his chest. The Westerners, from this he receives the titular Mark of the Beast and starts to slowly transform into human jackal something. showcases all the traditional transformation horror story. Symptoms starts to all of a sudden eat blood, raw meat, etc., etc., etc. And this goes on up until the end when his also cultivated friends manage to finally aid our poor target to get rid of to have the curse lifted, and then all is well. The cultivated Westerner here later on remembers nothing about the whole weird human jackal curse thing, and basically everything ends up fine. And that story itself is somewhat of an example of the demonizing Oriental exotism that was being used as a shorthand for alien and terrifying. The whole kinda the angle that Kipling was playing in his short story was about the notion of those heathen lands. The heathen place of India where you have the lepers roaming the streets and they are carrying all these weird curses which are a threat to the civilized Western colonialist folk. And looking at the Palace of Horrors, which now is a horror short coming from India, the country that Kipling himself once victimized, I actually felt a hell of a lot. Like, I got strong Mark of the Beast vibes here. Not just because the story itself has a lot of beats from, the adventure stories of that era. You have small number of Westerners. Here it's 2. You have the whole nighttime at camp thing going on. You have the mystical beasts of India. In here they are in the king's castle basement thingy. And I like watching the Palace of Horrors. The one story that I really strongly started to think about was Kipling's Mark of the Beast.
This could also be something a little bit more simple in the way that it mixes the whole gentry with this, let's say, fictional storyline. This could very much be something that the director Ashlim Ahluwalia is known for, the unconventional films that mix and blur together documentary and fiction. Perhaps like in his film Daddy from 2017, which I haven't seen, which is about gangster turned politician Arun Gauli, but it seems to incorporate some fictional elements into it. So in that sense, this could be like a fiction meets non-fiction story.
It could, of course, be that. But I'm kind of still curious about what exactly is the end goal of the filmmakers here. Like, why tell this type of story? Why make a story from which at least my own personal first impulse was to start to think about, Kipling's short story, which itself is not really that good PR for India.
Well,
why does Indian film rely so heavily on the theme or the feeling of those stories? I was not entirely certain if this is some type of a attempt to turn the past demonification of India now into strength by partly doing the exact same thing. Like, if this is supposed to be some type of power play.
Well, speaking of PR in India, well, this is, at least it's based on, story-wise, to the Sundarbans. And in Sundarbans in India, there's this Sundarbans National Park, for example, which is a heavy traffic tourist destination. So it could be something like that. Hey, hello, I'm marketing my own country and hopefully somebody will like me very much and I will get follow-up jobs. For maybe it could be... I don't know how positive this subject matter is regarding Sundarban, but maybe.
Well, at least the depiction of India here in the Palace of Horrors, it's not saying nothing too nice. Once again, India is the mystical, exotic location where you can get the weird monsters into your monster collection. It's the half magical kingdom where you kind of have to be like wary of what you are doing and where you are going, because who knows, maybe the bloody lepers are once again wandering around, just outside the palace.
It's as if the tourists wouldn't be already worried enough about the Bengali tigers and trying to survive in that nature reserve by itself. But then you have to worry about creatures that suck your eyeballs out.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, India, why are you doing this? Like, didn't the Western colonialists already, weren't they dickish enough? Like, do you now feel that you also like have to follow these days a rather problematic example left by Kipling and the co?
Well, hell, maybe it's an anti-PR campaign. It's like, please don't come here anymore.
or perhaps it's a Western PR campaign, because like I said, I couldn't actually find the actual folk tale that this could be based upon. But what I did actually find pretty easily, simply by watching the film, were like 15 notes towards H.P. Lovecraft of all the goddamn things, to a point where in the collection of freaks, the king here also has collected some type of a Cthulhu-esque tentacle face monster thing into his basement. This was actually more than Indian folk tale. This felt like an H.P. Lovecraft tale.
Well, is there anything that H.P. Lovecraft hasn't written about?
Well, at least anything positive about the people in India and in Russia.
All right. Well, I guess we are at least partly grasping at straws at this point. So
I actually find it somewhat interesting. Like, why this? And I do kind of find it does lead into rather in my opinion, nice philosophical question when it comes to the folk tales, which is that folk tales. The whole word consists of two separate words: folk and tale, or folk and lore. And these days now at the internet time, when we have Slender Man and we have creepypastas, and those are being regarded as internet folklore, the actual question to draw from here would be that the works of H.P. Lovecraft, or not the works, but the mythos that he created, the Cthulhu mythos, can it actually someday turn into a modern day folklore? Because these days the mythos itself, or Cthulhu, it's so widely known that even the people who never had read Lovecraft, who necessarily haven't even heard the name Lovecraft, have still heard the name Cthulhu. So the mythos and the name Cthulhu, it has grown larger than the name of the author. And while, yes, of course, the stories written by Lovecraft will always belong to Lovecraft. They will never be folklore. At least I believe they won't be. But I am kind of wondering if the mythos itself, if the vision that you have about, when I say Cthulhu, you have a vision of tentacle thing.
I have a vision of unpronounceable word.
Well, which is also like goddamn. But I'm kind of can actually the mythos itself, outside of Lovecraft, can it turn into a modern day folklore, or is it already now?
Well, unfortunately, we might need to press on to the next one. Kind of like the film, we're pressed on time. But Germany.
Yeah, Germany.
Nocturne.
They made a short film for this collection.
Yes.
called, what was it? The Nocturnal Whispers, or what?
A Nocturnal Breath, directed by Katrin Geppe. So let's find out how bad things get if you don't shoot your zombie sister before you want to make love to her. Excuse me, what? So the summarization of the film says that a druid is a Bavarian malevolent spirit that leaves the body of the possessed to haunt and spread disease. The person lies there lifeless until the spirit returns. And if the druid is killed, the person remains dead.
So when it comes to incestual sex with your sister, the prime opening time slot would be after the druid has left, but before it returns. Because your sister is technically dead, so most likely don't remember anything that happened.
Yeah, so...
I just cracked it for you, Germany. That's how you do it.
There you go. Well, yeah, we have something that first looks like a love story, like a nice boy from the neighborhood is just being a little pervert and then gets thrown into a nice relationship with a nice little lady. But no, they are brother and sister. And and in the forefront we have this, let's say, an evil mouse that is the druid that keeps the sister still alive.
Yeah, so when we started this episode with Fritzl jokes, we were kind of forced to do that by the Germans.
Yeah, we have a lot of incest around these films, but
well, that's the good old folk tale. Well, at least once again, like with India, I wasn't exactly certain what is the folk tale that they are trying to use here. Well, with this one, it's clear. It's true. They give it to you out like straight out the gate, and that is a real folklore entity. When I mentioned in Hallfall that when it comes to Germanic elves, it gets quite tricky to actually differentiate them from each other. Well, I promise that we have to once again return to that point, because bloody hell, if it's hard to actually differentiate between Alp and a druid. Folklore-wise, they are supposed to be two different entities.
Aren't they the same?
But then again, when you start to look at the stories, not this story here, because here the druid is some type of a weird disease rat thing that lives inside of a dead sister, but basically the typical depictions of druid, they are surprisingly close to the depictions of Alp, to a point where they get mixed very easily, and it's kind of like, where does Alp end and the druid begin?
Okay, I thought that it's basically the same creature, elf, Alp, just one creature having many names all over the times.
You would, and it's extremely natural misconception to make, simply because they are so goddamn similar. Which kind of perhaps helps to explain exactly why the druid here is nothing like its folklore counterpart, where it is a mischievous elvish thing, and in here it's a weird plague rat.
Right. Well, it's an adaptation.
It's an adaptation.
Here it's in the form of a rat, and it takes over the whole family house. Let's assume that the mother and father have already died due to this disease. We have only the incest brother and some animals left. Animals which affectionately have been given names. But they all die, and now in the end the brother still tries to keep the sister alive by taking the rat to him by an incest kiss. But then it ends up that it just seems that the sister is still infected by this viral disease and shoots the brother.
I took it that the sister just like has the balls to do the right thing here.
Oh,
and,
okay.
And shoot the brother, and in doing so also kill the druid. Because there really is no the truth is the problem plaguing the household of the brother and sister.
But
and as long as the truth is around, everything will absolutely go to shit, as it is shown with the dying farm animals. So naturally, that the only correct course here to take would be to kill the truth.
But judging from the eyes of the sister, it seems that there is more to it than she's not crying. She's just seems to be very content that this is happening the way it's happening with the shotgun and all. It seems as if she's still possessed, or she's now free of the possession, and she can finally determine that the brother is a pile of shit and better to get rid of him anyway.
I kind of am thinking that, or reading the situation like that, it's the way how the sister, like two things is achieved here. The first of all, of course, the truth dies. Good riddance. But also, the sister kinda now is free to leave the house that they have been inhibiting and go into, well, wherever she would like to go.
Yeah, it's due to kind of the incompetence of the brother to finally shoot his sister that the whole place is getting infected.
Mm-hmm. Which of course, it's a natural conundrum. Can you really kill the sister you love? Perhaps extremely fleshy here? Or, will you just, linger on in some form, even though it's not good for absolutely anyone, including the family dog? But, it's like the typical zombie horror film conundrum. It's hard to kill your loved ones, even when you know that would be the right course to take. And that leads into incompetence on behalf of the brother, which basically kills all the animals on their farm, and eventually even condemns him. And with the opening text, like how the drought is supposed to operate, the victim is alive as long as the drought is inside you. If once it leaves, you fall dead, and you are dead until it returns back into you. And if the drought is killed while it's not inside of you, you stay dead. Well, which begs the question: if the drought is first inside the sister, and then the brother takes the drought upon himself, wouldn't the sister still have, isn't she supposed to stay dead now?
Right. Not sure exactly what happens, but judging from her facial expressions at the end, even the smile at the end, there is something really sinister going on with that. Excuse me, it's not shotgun, I think it's a rifle. I don't know anything about guns, but it seems like a rifle to me.
Yeah, it's a hunting rifle.
Yeah. Good going. But what about Cobbler Slot, Hungary?
Perhaps the most interesting of these shorts.
At least background-wise. So it's directed by a British director, though, Peter Strickland, and the film basically explains why you shouldn't look for your ex-girlfriends, especially if they are dead. But I was a little, even when first watching this film, I was a little feeling disinterest when the description goes like, quote, loosely based on the folktale. Why say loosely? Well, it's loosely based on the princess's curse, in which two brothers vie for the attention of a princess, end quote. Perhaps a bit unfortunate that it is loosely doing that. There's been a lot of that loose going on here. Maybe not the biggest fan.
I don't know. I think that Cobbler's Lot actually stays more true to the original folktale than some other segments here in this collection. So this might be just overtly critical opening from the short film itself. You needn't be this harsh on yourself. I kind of like the deviations that this takes from the original folktale, because the folktale has once again the sippy sappy happy ending of it all. Here in Cobbler's Lot, we don't have that.
Yeah, so the original story more or less goes in the same vein, but then she's in the coffin and one of the guards then wins the lady after the corpse of the lady has been desperately trying to kill the future husband, but then by the end, miraculously, the princess becomes alive again after some kind of a curse after her death has been removed. Where did that curse even come? What's supposed to be the curse? The lady just says in the original story that she is gonna die now in 3 days, so please prepare my funeral preparations.
I took it that the curse comes simply from the fact of her being extremely pissed at the two brothers. The first one that lied while trying to win her over, and that's the crime that actually like condemned her.
But what's the second
to die
dude's
because
crime?
the second dude's crime in the original story is the fact that he does not believe that the princess will wait for him. The whole thing goes that the was it now younger or older brother? I guess it was the older brother who is the bad guy in the story. Let's say it's older brother. The older brother lies to the younger one that the princess has actually gotten so goddamn tired of waiting his sorry ass to come back with the mystical flower thing that he was supposed to pick and bring the princess as a sign of his affection, that the princess has now married another dude.
Yeah,
and the brother believes this instead of believing into the princess just waiting for him. And
right.
that's the crime that he has to pay for.
The big,
it's kind
big
of
crime.
petty. It's kind of weak crime. It's petty from the princess and the fact that the curse operates on some type of a vampire mechanism where if the princess does not get back into her coffin until sunrise, the curse is somehow lifted. It's also kind of just a easy way to finally get into a happy ending.
Yeah. It's something about the clock when the bell chimes, then the lady at certain hour will get from her coffin and starts killing people and becomes like a corpse serial killer.
Yeah.
And she has motivations to, if you're grasping, she has motivation to kill those two brothers. But then she starts killing all the guards that are guarding her coffin as well. I was wondering, what's the motivation for those?
Well, she just likes killing.
Right. I would have loved to see her motivation for killing all those people. I kill you because, I don't know, I just don't like your face.
It's a curse thing. It also means that murder is okay once the curse is lifted, and you don't actually have to, suffer any kind of consequences for all the killings you did. Because curse.
But don't know why, but I still quite enjoyed the original story. Oh, that was good old fun.
It was a good traditional, like, fairy tale.
Yeah.
With a nice splash of violence and piles of bones.
Definitely. Something to tell to your kids by the candlelight at age 5.
Yeah, but I also quite like the short films version, where both brothers die, and at the end, sandals are being made out of their stupid faces. A desecration of a human body. It's always a good way to end your story.
And when you think about how this film has been done, like it's mimicking, it's basically like a silent film styled film, and when you start thinking about the story, when you start thinking about making it in sound and in like a modern filmmaking ways, it might become a bit awkward, but somehow this film retains its fairy tale-ish nature by avoiding the dialogue in audio.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons why I so loved this one. the final tale. It's a really curious case because it's the Hungarian short directed by a British guy, and like you said, it's taking notes from silent films, especially from the old surrealistic German silent movies. There's a lot of the same things that you see in Metropolis, you see in Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Basically, the famous German examples of the German surrealism in cinema, and they are being utilized in here. It's curious, like mixed bag of things. I'm surprised that this is the one that comes from Hungary and not from the Germany. Why was Germany's input, your traditional filmmaking, and all of a sudden the Brit directing for Hungarians is the one who, borrows from Germany's silent film tradition? Can't really understand why, but I am really grateful for the fact that somebody actually did this.
And I quite enjoy the overly done surreal nature of the kind of a paradise shot where there's like lots of white liquid thrown around everywhere.
It's obviously been a really good night.
Right.
But when it comes to like the visual set design, that perhaps is the one gripe that I have with this segment. I love the cinematography. I do think that does pretty good job in borrowing from or paying tribute to Caligari. And when it comes to costumes, when it comes to hair, when it comes to the actors, they managed to pull it off. But something that was signature for those films, that one aspect that everybody always brings up when they show you pictures of Dr. Caligari or they talk about it, is the set design, the surrealistic set design where the rooftops do whatever and the trees are all wonky, etc., etc., etc. And that's the one area, that's the one aspect where this one falls short. The story itself, it uses a real-life castle, which, good for you, you found a nice castle in Hungary and you decided to take your money's worth. Typically, grade A, this is exactly what you should do. Except this just happens to be this short film, the short film that borrows so heavily from the themes, from, the language of Dr. Caligari, it shouldn't have done that. It's too grounded, it's too realistic, it's too naturalistic, it's too easy to believe that, a castle would be built like this. And it's like the one hang-up that I have. Why is the set design so natural? It should have been like out of place, surrealistic, wonky.
Well, something that is realistic and wonky is also the camera work. There is this quality of blurriness that you see in old hand-cranked films. Could be even that they were using old film camera lenses when making this, but I think what it is, it's still digitally enhanced.
I would say the same thing, and I'm basing this on the fact that when it comes to that effect, there is a noticeable difference in sharpness and image quality when you have the center of the frame and when you have like the blurred edges, especially like the upper and the lower edge of the image. So to me, that's screaming like post to digital processing, some type of a like filter thrown on the image to give it this quality.
Seems kind of like an afterthought. It would have been nice to use some old lenses on it, but what it does have is also the coloring, kind of reminiscent of those old black and white films where you would have one frame in only one color, kind of colorized afterwards, or you would have 2 or 3 or 4, a couple of colors. You have a lot of that style. So kind of appreciate it.
Yeah. And I'm willing to forgive it here because this is like cheaply made short film in a folklore horror anthology. I'm kind of okay with the fact that you didn't have the money and the time, and you didn't see the trouble of replicating an old camera and playing with the lenses, and you just took the easy route and you digital processing in post-production. Fine in this case. But at the same time, while I'm forgiving it, this case also does showcase exactly how hard it is to actually really nail the vibe, the feeling of the old black and white or old color film, and nailing that aesthetic. Because they doesn't manage to do it here, even though they make a really condemnable attempt. Like, it's not enough. If you want to emulate a silent film, it's not enough that you don't have a dialogue and you just have like dialogue cards showing up on screen. It's not enough that you don't use color and it's just a black and white. It's not enough that on top of all of this, you also like you have actors who act like people acted in those films. It's just like that there's always something that is too modern, and it always throws a wrench into the illusion that this is like an old school, old-timey black and white movie.
Oh yeah.
You have to like nail all of the things. You have to nail the soundtrack, the acting, the sets, the costumes, the makeup, the camera itself. Everything has to kind of go hand in hand if you today are trying to replicate an like 30s black and white movie.
Yeah, and even those that you mentioned, that's not enough, because even if you nail the aesthetic by changing the lenses, what you're still struggling with is just the natural decay of the film that you don't have, which you could of course emulate with throwing in some dirt and doing some artificial scratching, but not doing it digitally, just doing something to the film. But that's a lot of work.
It's a hell of a lot of work, and it's a hell of a hard stunt to pull off.
Yeah.
Like back in those days, even the physical film itself that you used to shoot, it wasn't really grade A quality. It was for the time period, certainly yes. But when you compare about like how much data that film, the physical film, was able to capture versus how much data a modern day digital camera can capture, it's a light and day. And that's also something that you actually see in quality. It's my favorite example of this problem would be Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. That was directed in 1992. So, nowhere near the time frame of black and white silent films. But Coppola decided that he absolutely wants to he wants to make the film so that it pays tribute to the old school filmmaking. All the camera tricks had to be practical, or the effects had to be practical, etc., etc., etc. And they utilized like a lot of the old school film tricks done by Chaplin and Buster Keaton and friends. But Coppola decided that this too is not enough. He wanted to have an old school black and white silent take. It's one camera pan in the film. It's the moment when Dracula starts to roam the streets of London. It's a short, it's a few seconds, just a few seconds. But Coppola decided that he has to have that.
You
has
mean
to have it.
Done it with Crank, or?
Yeah.
Ah.
That was the only way how Coppola managed to do it. They had to actually rebuild the actual camera, like the old Crank camera, for that one take, or that one pan that they eventually took. And not just the camera, they also physically recreated the old school film, like the physical film reel. They looked how film was created back in those days, and they replicated the process, creating their own film for their own hand-cranked camera. Because nothing else was authentic enough when they wanted to try to capture the feeling of the Buster Keaton era black and white silent films. And even with that end result, you can kind of have agree or disagree whether or not was Coppola himself, was even he successful in his attempt, or is it still too clear and too modern and too good?
Yeah, well, I bet that if you could put if you could reincarnate or put into a time machine the likes of Max Schreck or the makers of Nosferatu and bring them to the Blu-ray era, they would see all this wonderful technology and they'd be like, what the fuck, Coppola?
Most likely, if you would bring them to the present day, I don't believe they would actually go with Blu-ray. If I do believe that they would stick to their old like the way how they did it. Or if they're going to upgrade, they're going to notice that the golden point is the VHS.
Oh, the gold standard.
The gold standard of filmmaking.
Yeah, the VHS, it's like one comedian put it. The time that VHS was gone, the US economy went to shit because all the VHS fixers, they went out of job. It was running the economy of the country. But yeah. Quickies?
Yeah, why not?
Wanna take the lead here, or?
I can take the lead. So, special mention for an actor goes to where and why?
Oh, well, let's put it to Marlene Hauser Marlene Hauser as Kati in The Sinful Woman of Höllfall.
On the other hand, I'm extremely tied between Karli Hajduk and Peter Jankovic. Absolutely butchering the names here. But anyways, the actors who play the two brothers in The Couplers a lot. Both do really good job, and it's a coin toss for me, but I go with Hajduk, who plays Tivadar. Is there still some very small special role in some of these shorts that you would like to shine a light on?
Henrik, not really a role, but the two parents in the Melonhead segment fighting like children caught my attention. Like, you just want to fight. Fuck off.
I on the other hand, this one also goes to the Copplers a lot. Boy, it's winning a lot of my quickies today. It's the legs. All of the bloody legs. It's like leg. It's almost like Quentin Tarantino himself directly at that moment. What resonated with you the most or the least?
Well, as I'm not really into mythology or ancient human delusions, it was still kind of interesting to read about some of it, and especially that short story that we mentioned, The Princess Curse from Hungary.
Yeah, for my end, it unfortunately is the least, and that goes to United States. Thanks a lot for the melon heads. I really didn't feel them, and I still do hope that they would have been removed from the film. In one adjective, how would you describe, well, not the films, but the anthology as a like unified movie?
It was fascinating. Just gonna go with fascinating.
Yeah. To me, it was, my adjective is, and this is going to be bad, but it was different. My take here is that the movies themselves were stylistically different, which led into different like experiences from one segment to the next, but like that whole thing just boils down into an adjective different.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite quote? Somehow hesitant to think that no.
No,
well,
but I will just say that what is it with this American daddios depicted in these American films. They're just trying to pretend to be so much of the buddy kind and using this "but, dude, sucker."
I think it's some kind of a weird American culture bonding thing that they are trying to pull off.
Yeah,
Like
it's just...
well, don't know how Americans are in real life, but in their fiction that they produce, they constantly want to point out how especially the dad and the son are supposed to have like some type of a kinship bond where they go throw ball together and, what have you. There's supposed to be some type of a manly, from man to boy tie that they share, and I guess this is like supposed to somehow strengthen or emphasize that.
Yeah, it just seems... I don't know how they do that, but it just smells kind of artificial.
So, how do you think? Do you think that or the melonhead artificiality in dialogue still standing? Do you think that the films have any staying power or legacy, or this collection? Let's say, does this collection have a staying power or legacy?
No, this collection most likely doesn't have any staying power or legacy. Among horror circles, I'm sure there's a couple of segments that people will share over the internet.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I also don't see that this film would last the test of time. I'm not necessarily even as positive as you are with, with the individual segments. I kind of think that this is one that will be forgotten altogether quite quickly. In some cases, it's perhaps a shame, but what you're gonna do. So, talking about the segments, is there an order you would like to put these?
I kind of threw these haphazardly together in my list, but I will go with the Haunted by Al-Kharisi from Turkey. That was just plain old fun, and then followed by Austria's the Sinful Woman of Hellfire. That was a strong starting point. I quite enjoyed it. From the States, Beware of the Melonheads. It's kind of entertainment value is what I found from it.
You're a weird person.
But then the next choice...
Zach is no longer in the cast, so you don't have to pay lip service.
It's not perfect by any means, but there were some interesting shots, some interesting pictures that kind of kept coming back to my head. But speaking of heads, let's move somewhere else. The Palace of Horrors on my list as the fourth one, kind of inconclusive. I guess it tells a story, but it's a weird mishmash. Germany, A Nocturnal Breath. Hungary, Cobbler's Lot, finally. And Poland, I've no idea what's going on here, but I will put The Kindler and the Virgin as the seventh, and then finally, Whatever Happened to Panagas the Pagan, Nothing as the last one.
Okay, well, that's a surprising run-up, because I actually have completely different take on my list. I start with Cobbler's Lot, which was the most enjoyable in my end, followed by Krisis, Whatever Happened to Panagas the Pagan. I think those are like the two best ones here. Then, well, the third place goes to Turkey for being the most frightful of the shorts, Haunted by Al-Kharisi, followed by Austria's Sinful Woman of Hellfall, a movie that was not really terrifying, but it was a good opener for this collection. And from there it gets kind of tighter competition, but it's followed by Poland's The Kindler and the Virgin. It was still adequate enough installment. Well, all around well-made short film for the collection. Same can also kind of be said for India's The Palace of Horrors, even though I still can't quite understand what exactly India was trying to pull off with its entry. And the final 2 places would go, well, first, Germany, A Nocturnal Breath. It was well made, but I just kinda didn't feel it. And that the final place is, like, United States, Beware the Melonheads, which is the short that I enjoyed the least.
Perhaps I could make a little adjustment here on my end as well. And after some consideration, I will at least put the Melonheads on position 6.
It's still too high, but I let it stand. But complete the sentence. You really know you are watching. Well, let's just say the combination. So you really know you are watching the Field Guide to Evil when.
When grown-up men materialize and perpetuate collective age-old stories produced by human brain malfunction. Something to be expected from me.
I have to point out, folklore and myths are 2 different things. They are not one and the same.
Yeah.
Folklore is an oral storytelling tradition that just tells funny stories. Which may of course have, mirror the societal expectations and attitudes of the time, sometimes also religious ones.
Yeah.
Once again, Whole Fall is a in this collection is a good example, a critical take on what went behind the scenes of the folklore business back in the day. But still, they are not the same thing as myths.
True that.
Yeah, but yeah, on my end, you really know you're watching the Field Guide to Evil when inbreeding, incest, and fratricide are once again back in the business. But yeah, let's go through the final, perhaps the longer questions, if they turn out to be as such. Did you actually like these films / collection?
Well, let's say that I like them quite a bit, except the 3 last ones from the US, Poland, and Greece.
Yeah, I on the other hand, I did like some of these films, but I didn't necessarily like the anthology itself. I have my problems with like how the anthology was built, and even though there are really good like individual pieces here, I don't think that Field Guide to Evil as a movie, as a DVD, kinda works as well as it perhaps would like to believe that it does.
Perhaps that's the reason for the ratings. To be honest, I didn't read any ratings. I tried to not to manipulate my brain before going into the analysis by myself, but that could be the reason. It's kind of the jerkiness, kind of the description that you said. What was it like? You put the full brakes on and then you go again.
Yeah. Would you still kind of... Do you believe, would you watch at least some of these segments someday again?
No, man, I'm busy. but well, if I would have abundant time, then yeah, some of it was kind of great, but I don't think it's so great that I would pop this on again. Well, I quite enjoyed the Telkki one. If I needed to show it to some nerd, then probably I would show it to him, but yeah.
Yeah, let's say I would not watch the entire film again, because I too am way too busy for that, and I also don't have the interest. But I might like from DVD menu to jump into some of the individual segments and perhaps check one of those. Like some night I may quickly recheck like Hungary's Cobbler Slot or the Greece's entry here. Most likely I'm not even gonna watch those. Like it's just going to be one short film some night. And like my revisits with this one will be like that from this day onwards.
Well, by the way, did you explain where this film actually popped up from? I take it that you haven't watched it before.
No, I actually just found it while Googling completely at random.
Wow. Okay. I like that.
There's no history between me and this film. There's no rumors. There's nothing. I just Googled it at one evening.
You googled evil.
I googled horror anthologies, and this was one of the entries that popped up alongside with ABCs of Death and the VHS movies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I suggested the supposed best movie from Wales, and you were like, nope, let's Google something randomly. Gotcha.
Once again, it was gonna be just one movie for today's episode, and I decided that if we're gonna cover only one film, it's gonna have all the nations and all the directors.
Gosh. Yeah, this was supposed to be easy, and then I have to go into possibly 8 mythologies from 8 countries. Oh.
But would you recommend, let's say, the film in total? Would you recommend Field Guide to Evil?
Let's get back into that, but like I said, I wouldn't really recommend the US, the Poland, and the Greece. But The Sinful Woman of Hellfall, well, it's essential viewing for any woman who wants to come out of the closet. Motivational material. Or Haunted by Alcarisi, it's the best field guide for pregnant women. Or The Kindler and the Virgin, it reminds us why Henrik shouldn't become a priest. Or Melonheads, it's exploring the existential question, I guess, taking place in all the families out there. Who are the real melonheads? What happened to Panagas the Pagan? Well, nobody cares. The Palace of Horrors. It's a moral guide for all the evil circus owners out there. That's what will happen to you. A Nocturnal Breath. It's for educational purposes on why not to eat CGI rats. And for Cobbler's Lot, it's also a reminder to not get involved with zombie princesses. Just stick with the princess. That's prince, as in plural. I think that's princess. And hopefully this curse of the film, or suggested by the film and the story, can be reconciled by a little brotherly incest version on Pornhub. So would I recommend the whole anthology? It's kind of a tough one, but overall I actually liked the content. I will give this a recommendation.
Okay. I, on the other hand, I'm on the opposite end of the question. Like you, there are some segments, some individual shorts that I could recommend. In my opinion, in my lists, the strong recommendations would be Hungary and Greece, and then Austria perhaps would be a lukewarm. But I wouldn't I'm somehow really hesitant to give recommendations even to the individual segments here. And I really can't recommend the movie itself. Like the Field Guide to Evil, horror anthology. It's an interesting angle to take. I like the fact that we have a horror anthology that bases on folklore. And I honestly would hope that this is not the last we are going to hear from this idea. I would love to see Field Guide to Evil 2, which I would hope would be a better anthology, but this just doesn't do it enough, in my opinion, to merit a recommendation. There are good ideas, and there are good discussions that you can have thanks to this film. Like you can start to ponder about folklore and folk tale tradition, and has it been oppressive? What has been perhaps the damage that have been done by folklores and through folklores? And there are all these questions that you can approach once you check the movie out. But I still just kind of can't recommend actually seeing the trouble of watching the movie itself. It's a case where this is a movie that is more interesting to talk about than it's actually to watch.
Even though it's a mixed bag, after watching it, you have kind of gathered a couple of, I would say, even quite strong visual images from the film. And the folklore surrounding this, yeah, it's kind of interesting to chew on after the fact of watching it. It becomes worthy of the trouble of getting into it because of those 2-3 stories, let's say, out of the whole bunch. So I would say even that you can skip freely some of them, which I guess would defeat the anthology purpose. But then again, because these are kind of separate units, some work, some don't. So the ones from Turkey and Austria specifically, good stuff.
Yeah, and that's a good way to cap this off, because it kind of summarizes one of the positives in anthology films. Like, unlike a full feature, one movie, unlike something that Scorsese makes, which lasts 3 hours and it's the one story, you just have to watch it in like from start to finish. You can't just jump into scene 35 and really have an experience unless you are trying to pay attention into how one camera zoom was pulled off or something like that. But with anthologies, you don't actually have to go through the entire thing. You can just, once you've seen it once, then it's free game and you can just, jump into your favorite segments and only watch those if you feel like it. And you don't like... With anthologies, you are free from the need to watch all of it.
Speaking of anthology, what's that South Korean one that they have two chapters of that? Famous directors creating stories for that. What the hell is that name?
I know what you're talking about.
But that would be fun to watch at some point. 3 Extremes.
Yeah, perhaps someday we can actually go in and check out, the whole 3 Extremes thing. After all, we already kind of have dabbled in it with covering dumplings as a standalone.
To be honest, as far as I remember, these weren't particularly good, but...
I kind of have the same recollection. It was, at least for me, seeing how it had, high caliber directors, Fru-chan, Park Chan-wook, and Takashi Miike, especially from which Miike and Fru-chan were something that I was interested about. I do remember that it was somewhat disappointing.
But maybe we could touch on Fru-chan. I've been meaning to do that at some point.
Yeah, why not? I mean, Fru-chan virginity in this podcast has already been lost, so can just kind of follow with that. We can check out his Prostitute trilogy.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about those films, but the subject matter of the trilogy sounds promising.
Yeah, he's the guy who became kind of a big name in the 90s when he was kind of inventing the cinema of Hong Kong and bringing political color to the films at a touchy time. Yeah, we could check out at one point.
Yeah, I only just know the dumplings.
All right. Any thoughts before we head to the outro, or should we race to the parking lot of the lab?
I guess at this time point it's just better start running.
And in the next episode, yeah, there's a couple of things that we could do. Of course, one thing that could be kind of ready to go is unfortunately located in the Korean peninsula. But
once again, it's been 2 episodes. I'm starting to feel homesick already.
But this would be the perfect time to do so, to move from the human mythologies to something non-fiction. If you would do a documentary with me, I just have happened to read also the book related to the documentary. It's about a North Korean escapee refugee who is still known apparently to be the only one who has escaped a political prison camp in North Korea and has come to tell the story to us stupid Westerners. It's Camp 14, Total Control Zone.
Yeah, we could check that one out. I make no promises of reading the book for the episode, though.
We have done documentary before. We were kind of forced by the Oscars, but let's just do a documentary now and go to Camp 14, Total Control Zone. Fun times to talk about the North Korean refugee.
Sounds like a North Korean prison camp.
Exactly.
It's just like this podcast.
Best sides of every country.
Okay, so it's once again we haven't picked on North Koreans for quite some time.
Yeah, we've done it once.
Yeah.
All right. We would like to invite you to continue this conversation with us online on our social media pages. The first one to do so will win 1 Bitcoin automatically. And we'll hope you'll...
The second one will win the flying ticket to the North Korean prison camp.
Yeah, something like that. But thank you for joining us, and see you in a fortnight.
Until then.
Mikähän teknobiisi Henrikistä seuraavaksi tehdään sitten?
Eat my flesh, 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 flesh, at least occasionally flesh, at least occasionally flesh, at least occasionally flesh. Jaa, katkaisee nauhoitus.